The stars around Nexus Prime burned bright in the eternal darkness of space. Emperor Caldrus stood on the observation deck of his massive palace, watching the ships of his fleet move between the 12 worlds of his empire. For 300 years, the Zephyrian Empire had ruled this section of the galaxy with wisdom and strength. The Emperor's people were tall, graceful beings with silver skin that seemed to glow in starlight. Their minds could touch across vast distances, speaking without words through the gift of telepathy. Princess Lyra was the most gifted of all Zephyrians. Her telepathic abilities were so strong that she could connect the minds of commanders across entire star systems. She served as the living heart of the Empire's communication network, making their military coordination possible across the vast emptiness of space. At only 25 years old, she had already proven herself essential to keeping the 12 worlds united under her father's rule. The princess had left 3 days ago on what should have been a simple diplomatic mission to the Outer Rim worlds. These frontier planets were always restless, always needing reassurance that the Empire still cared about their distant concerns. Lyra had volunteered for the mission, eager to see the edges of their territory and meet the people who lived so far from the capital world. Her escort consisted of 5 warships, each one a masterpiece of Zephyrian technology. Their hulls were made of quantum-forged metals that could withstand the blast of a small star. Their weapons could tear apart asteroids with focused energy beams. Their shields could deflect almost any known weapon in the galaxy. The fleet commander, Admiral Zen, was one of the most experienced officers in the Imperial Navy. Everything had gone wrong in the Koros system. The Crimson Syndicate had been waiting. This criminal organization had plagued the Empire for decades, striking at merchant ships and remote colonies before vanishing into the lawless regions of space. They were led by beings from a dozen different species, united only by their greed and hatred of organized government. Their ships were fast and deadly, cobbled together from stolen technology and black market weapons. The attack came without warning. 20 Syndicate ships dropped out of hyperspace around the diplomatic convoy, their weapons already charging. Admiral Zen tried to form a defensive formation, but the pirates had chosen their moment perfectly. The convoy was passing through an asteroid field where the larger Imperial ships could not maneuver freely. The battle lasted only 18 minutes. The Syndicate ships swarmed the escort vessels like angry insects, striking at weak points and retreating before the Imperials could respond effectively. One by one, the warships fell silent. Admiral Zen's flagship exploded in a brilliant flash that lit up the entire asteroid field. The remaining ships tried to protect the princess's transport, but they were overwhelmed by superior numbers. Princess Lyra's ship was disabled but not destroyed. The pirates needed her alive. They used special weapons that disrupted electronics without causing explosions. Her transport drifted helplessly as Syndicate boarding pods attached to its hull like metal parasites. Emperor Caldrus learned of the disaster through his daughter's own telepathic scream. Across 7 light-years of empty space, he felt her terror and pain as the pirates broke into her ship. He felt her desperation as they dragged her away from her fallen guards. Then suddenly the connection went dead. The criminals had devices that could block telepathic communication, cutting the princess off from her people completely. The Emperor immediately called his war council. The greatest military minds in the Empire gathered in the crystal chamber beneath his palace. General Thane commanded the Imperial Army. Admiral Vera controlled the space fleet. Intelligence Director Koss knew every secret worth knowing in their corner of the galaxy. They all agreed on one thing: Princess Lyra had to be rescued at any cost. The problem was finding her. The Crimson Syndicate operated from hidden bases scattered throughout the Void Sector, a dangerous region of space where gravitational storms made navigation nearly impossible. Ancient battles had left the area filled with radioactive debris and unstable energy fields. Most ships avoided the sector entirely, making it a perfect hiding place for criminals. Intelligence reports suggested 3 possible locations where the Syndicate might be holding the princess. The first was a mobile space station that moved constantly through the sector's edge. The second was a captured mining facility on a dead planet's moon. The third was an asteroid base deep in the sector's heart, where the gravitational effects were strongest. Admiral Vera wanted to attack all three locations simultaneously with overwhelming force. She had 200 ships at her disposal, enough firepower to level small moons. But Director Koss warned that such an approach would likely result in the princess's death. The Syndicate would kill her rather than let her be rescued. They needed a more careful approach. General Thane suggested using special forces teams. Small groups of elite soldiers could infiltrate the bases without being detected. They could locate the princess and extract her before the pirates knew what was happening. But the Void Sector's energy storms made stealth technology unreliable. The teams might be discovered before they could complete their mission. Days passed while the council debated and planned. Every hour that Princess Lyra remained in enemy hands was agony for her father. He could not eat or sleep, thinking constantly about what the criminals might be doing to his daughter. The Syndicate was known for its cruelty. They would not hesitate to torture her for information about Imperial defenses. Meanwhile, on the edge of the Void Sector, Jake Collins was having a very bad day. His cargo freighter, the Lucky Strike, was older than most of the crew members on modern starships. The ship had been built 40 years ago using human technology that other species considered primitive and unreliable. Its fusion engines were loud and inefficient. Its computer systems required manual input for most operations. Its hull was simple steel plating without fancy energy shields or quantum armor. Jake did not care about any of that. The Lucky Strike was his ship, bought with money he had saved from 15 years of hauling cargo between human colonies. She was not pretty or advanced, but she was dependable. Her engines had never failed him completely, though they had come close more times than he cared to remember. Today was another close call. Jake was 3 days into a routine cargo run from Earth to the mining colony on Kepler Station when his engine coolant system started acting up. The temperature gauges were climbing into the red zone, and he could hear unusual noises coming from the engine compartment. If he did not find a place to make repairs soon, the fusion reactor would shut down automatically, leaving him stranded in space. The Lucky Strike was currently passing through the outer edge of the Void Sector. Most ships avoided this area, but Jake's route planning computer had calculated it as the shortest path to his destination. The gravitational effects here were mild compared to the sector's interior, and his simple navigation systems could handle the interference. Jake checked his star charts for the nearest safe harbor. There were no official stations in this region, but the charts showed several large asteroids that might provide shelter while he worked on his engines. He selected one that appeared to be hollow, probably an old mining site that had been abandoned. Years ago, as the Lucky Strike approached the asteroid, Jake noticed something odd. There were other ships nearby, sleek vessels with aggressive designs that he did not recognize. They were too far away for his basic sensors to identify, but something about them made him nervous. Pirates were known to operate in the Void Sector, and Jake had no desire to attract their attention. He powered down all non-essential systems and approached the asteroid from its shadow side, hoping to remain unnoticed. The Lucky Strike's simple design worked in his favor here. The advanced ships probably would not even register his presence on their sensors. To them, he would look like just another piece of space debris. Jake guided his ship into a narrow tunnel that led deep into the asteroid's interior. The tunnel had been carved by mining equipment decades ago, leaving smooth walls that reflected his ship's running lights. He found a natural chamber large enough to dock and began shutting down his systems for repairs. He had no idea that he had just arrived at the most heavily guarded criminal stronghold in the galaxy. He did not know that Princess Lyra was being held prisoner only a few hundred meters away. He certainly did not know that his arrival would change the fate of an entire empire. Jake Collins was just a simple cargo hauler trying to fix his engines. But sometimes the galaxy has other plans. Jake crawled under the Lucky Strike's engine compartment with a flashlight, clenched between his teeth and a wrench in his hand. The coolant leak was worse than he had first thought. Green fluid dripped steadily from a cracked pipe, pooling on the chamber floor beneath his ship. He would need to replace the entire section, but his spare parts were running low. The asteroid around him was completely silent, except for the occasional groan of settling rock. Jake had been working for 3 hours and had not seen or heard any sign of other life. The mysterious ships he had spotted earlier were probably just passing through the area. Pirates usually did not waste time hanging around. Empty rocks in the middle of nowhere. He finished patching the worst of the leak and decided to explore the asteroid's tunnels. Maybe the old miners had left behind some useful materials. Metal, scraps, power cables, or even basic tools could help him make temporary repairs. The Lucky Strike carried a small supply of emergency parts, but Jake preferred to save those for real emergencies. The tunnel system was more extensive than he had expected. Passages branched off in multiple directions, some leading deeper into the asteroid's core. Jake followed the main tunnel, using his flashlight to navigate through the darkness. The walls showed clear signs of mining equipment with smooth cuts and regular spacing that spoke of professional excavation. After walking for 20 minutes, Jake heard something that made him stop and listen carefully. It was a faint humming sound, like the noise of electrical equipment running at low power. He turned off his flashlight and continued forward in the darkness, moving slowly and trying to make no noise. A pale blue glow appeared ahead of him. Jake crept closer and found himself looking into a much larger chamber than the one where he had docked his ship. This cavern had been converted into some kind of facility. Metal corridors and sealed doorways had been built into the rock walls. Emergency lighting cast everything in an eerie blue color. Jake realized with growing alarm that this was not an abandoned mining site. Someone was using this asteroid as a base of operations. The sleek ships he had seen earlier suddenly made more sense. He was looking at a pirate stronghold, and he had parked his ship right in their backyard. His first instinct was to return to the Lucky Strike immediately and get out of the area before anyone noticed him. But as he started to back away from the chamber entrance, he heard voices echoing from somewhere inside the facility. The sounds were too distant to understand, but they were definitely coming closer. Jake looked around desperately for a hiding place. Near the chamber entrance, he spotted a ventilation grate that had been damaged by years of neglect. The metal covering hung loose on its hinges, revealing a narrow shaft that led deeper into the facility. It was barely wide enough for a human to crawl through, but it would have to do. He squeezed into the ventilation system just as footsteps echoed in the main tunnel. Through the grate, Jake watched 2 figures walk past his hiding spot. They were not human. One looked like a giant insect with multiple arms and clicking mandibles. The other resembled a lizard walking upright on 2 legs. Both carried energy, weapons that glowed with deadly power. The aliens spoke in a language Jake did not recognize, but their tone was clearly businesslike. They were conducting some kind of routine patrol. After they passed, Jake waited several minutes before moving deeper into the ventilation shaft. The shaft system seemed to run throughout the entire facility. Jake crawled through darkness for what felt like hours, following the sounds of activity and trying to map the layout in his mind. This was definitely a major operation. He could hear dozens of voices, equipment running, and the constant hum of power systems. Eventually, Jake found himself looking down through another damaged grate into what appeared to be a command center. The chamber below was filled with computer terminals and communication equipment. A large holographic display showed a map of the local star systems. Jake recognized the symbols marking imperial worlds and trade routes. Several aliens worked at the terminals, monitoring ship movements and intercepting communications. Jake realized he was looking at the heart of a pirate intelligence operation. These criminals were tracking Imperial fleet movements and planning their next attacks. No wonder they had been so successful against the Empire's forces. As Jake watched, a new figure entered the command center. This alien was clearly in charge. He stood nearly 8 feet tall with dark red skin and multiple eyes arranged around his skull. His voice carried the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed without question. The alien leader spoke an accented but clear Galactic standard, a language that Jake understood from his years of trading with different species. The words, made Jake's blood run cold. Status report on the Zephyrian princess, the leader demanded. One of the technicians looked up from his console. She remains in detention block 7, Commander Vex. The telepathic dampeners are functioning normally. She cannot contact her people. Good. Has she agreed to decode the Imperial military frequencies? Not yet, sir. She continues to refuse all cooperation. Commander Vex's multiple eyes narrowed with anger. Increase the pressure. The hegemony is paying us a fortune for those access codes. I want them within the next day, or our princess will discover just how unpleasant we can be. Jake's mind raced as he processed what he had just heard. These pirates had captured a Zephyrian princess. The entire Imperial fleet was probably searching for her, which explained the increased activity in this region. And now Jake was trapped inside their stronghold with no way to escape without being detected. He continued crawling through the ventilation system, following the directions he had overheard. Detention Block 7 was somewhere deeper in the facility. Jake told himself he was just gathering intelligence that might be useful if he managed to escape. He certainly was not planning to do anything heroic or stupid. The detention block was heavily guarded. Jake found a ventilation grate that looked down into a corridor lined with reinforced doors. Energy barriers glowed across each cell entrance, and armed guards patrolled the area constantly. This was clearly where they kept their most important prisoners. Jake worked his way along the ventilation shaft until he found a grate that offered a view into one of the cells. What he saw made him forget all about his own safety. A young woman sat on a simple bench in the center of the cell. Her skin had the distinctive silver glow of a Zephyrian, and her long hair seemed to shimmer with its own light. She was clearly exhausted and frightened, but her posture remained proud and defiant. This had to be Princess Lyra. As Jake watched, the cell door opened and Commander Vex entered with 2 guards. The pirate leader towered over the princess, his multiple eyes glowing with malicious intent. Your Highness, Vex said with mock politeness, I trust you have reconsidered our generous offer. Princess Lyra looked up at him with undisguised hatred. I will never help you or your criminal friends. My father will find me, and when he does, you will pay for this. Vex laughed, a sound like grinding metal. Your father's fleets are searching empty space while you rot in our detention cells. Face reality, princess. The mighty Zephyrian Empire cannot even protect its own royal family. The Empire is stronger than you know, Lyra replied firmly. And there are forces in this galaxy that you do not understand. Indeed there are, Vex. Agreed. Forces like pain and suffering, which you will experience firsthand if you continue to defy us. The buyers we have contacted are willing to pay almost as much for a broken princess as they would for a cooperative one. Jake watched in horror as one of the guards activated a device that sent visible energy coursing through the princess's body. She cried out in pain but did not beg or plead. Even under torture, she maintained her dignity. Think carefully about your next words, Your Highness, Vex warned. We can continue this conversation for as long as necessary. The pirates left the cell, sealing the energy barrier behind them. Princess Lyra slumped forward, clearly in pain but still unbroken. Jake found himself filled with rage at what he had witnessed. These criminals were torturing an innocent person for money, and they seemed to think they could get away with it. Jake knew he should return to his ship and try to escape. He was just one human with no military training and no advanced weapons. What could he possibly do against an entire pirate stronghold? The smart thing would be to slip away and report what he had seen to the Imperial authorities when he reached the next civilized system, but as he watched, Princess Lyra struggled to compose herself in her cell. Jake realized he could not just walk away. Maybe it was because she reminded him of his younger sister back on Earth. Maybe it was because he had always hated bullies who picked on people smaller than themselves. Or maybe it was simply because no one deserved to be treated the way these pirates were treating her. Jake Collins had never considered himself a hero. He was just a cargo hauler who wanted to make an honest living moving goods between the stars. But sometimes ordinary people find themselves in extraordinary situations. Sometimes the galaxy puts you exactly where you need to be, even if you never planned to be there. Jake began studying the detention block more carefully, looking for weaknesses in the security systems. He was probably going to get himself killed. Jake spent the next 6 hours crawling through the ventilation system, mapping every corridor and chamber he could reach. The pirate facility was much larger than he had first realized. It stretched deep into the asteroid's core, with multiple levels connected by lift shafts and maintenance tunnels. The pirates had done an impressive job converting the old mining site into a fortress. The more Jake explored, the more hopeless his situation seemed. The facility housed at least 200 pirates from a dozen different species. Their weapons were far superior to anything humans had ever developed. Their security systems could detect the smallest energy signatures. Their ships could outrun and outgun any vessel in the human fleet, but Jake had one advantage that the pirates did not expect. He was thinking like a human. The Crimson Syndicate had built their defenses around the assumption that any attack would come from advanced military forces using sophisticated technology. Their energy shields could stop particle beams and plasma cannons. Their sensors could detect cloaked ships and invisible infiltrators. Their automated systems could respond to electronic warfare and cyber attacks, what they had not prepared for. With someone using simple, old-fashioned methods, Jake returned to his ship and began gathering supplies. He emptied his cargo hold of everything useful. Industrial cutting torches became potential weapons. Heavy lifting cables could serve as climbing ropes. Chemical cleaning solvents might work as explosives if mixed properly. The Lucky Strike carried dozens of items that could be repurposed for a rescue mission. The key was understanding how the asteroid facility actually worked. Jake had noticed that the pirates relied heavily on automated systems to maintain their base. Computer programs controlled the life support, lighting, and security systems. Robots handled most of the routine maintenance work. The organic crew members focused on planning raids and managing their criminal operations. This gave Jake an idea that was either brilliant or completely insane. The asteroid's original mining equipment was still in place throughout the facility. Massive drilling machines sat unused in storage chambers, while processing plants filled entire caverns with their bulk. Conveyor systems and crushing mechanisms stretched for kilometers through the rock. The pirates had simply built their base around these machines without bothering to remove them. Jake realized that all this equipment was connected to the asteroid's original control network. The mining computers were still active, still monitoring the old machinery even though it was no longer being used. And these systems were completely separate from the pirate security network. If Jake could access the mining controls, he might be able to turn the asteroid's own equipment against its current occupants. He spent hours studying the facility's layout and identifying the most important systems. The main power grid fed electricity to both the pirate installations and the dormant mining equipment. The air circulation system used the original mining tunnels to move fresh air throughout the asteroid. The water recycling plant processed waste for both humans and aliens. Jake began to formulate a plan. It would require perfect timing and a lot of luck, but it might actually work. First, he needed to create a distraction that would draw the guards away from the detention block. The mining equipment included several large drilling machines that could be activated remotely. If those machines suddenly started up and began drilling in random directions, the pirates would have to investigate. They could not afford to let runaway equipment damage their base. Second, he needed a way to disable the energy barriers protecting Princess Lyra's cell. The barriers were powered by the main electrical grid, but they also had backup power supplies. Jake would have to find a way to cut both primary and secondary power to that specific section of the facility. Third, he needed an escape route that would not be blocked by security forces. The asteroid's mining tunnels connected to its surface through dozens of different shafts. Most of these were too small for pirate ships, but perfectly adequate for someone on foot. Jake gathered his improvised equipment and began putting his plan into action. He started by accessing the mining control systems through a maintenance terminal he found in an abandoned storage room. The passwords had never been changed from their factory defaults, making it easy for him to gain control of the equipment. He programmed several drilling machines to activate in sequence, creating a pattern of disturbances that would keep the pirates busy for at least an hour. Then he rigged explosive charges at key points in the power grid, using homemade bombs created from cargo chemicals and timer devices, salvaged from his ship's spare parts. The hardest part was getting close to the detention block without being seen. Jake had to leave the relative safety of the ventilation system and move through corridors where he might encounter guards at any moment. He carried a basic toolkit and wore maintenance coveralls he had found in a supply closet, hoping to pass for one of the automated repair units if anyone spotted him. The first phase of his plan worked perfectly. At exactly midnight, according to the facility's clock, the drilling machines roared to life in 3 different sections of the asteroid. Alarms began sounding throughout the base as automated safety systems detected unauthorized equipment activation. Jake heard running footsteps and shouted orders as the pirates rushed to investigate the disturbances. Most of the guards abandoned their posts to help with the emergency, leaving only a skeleton crew to watch the detention block. Jake waited in a storage closet near the prison section, counting the minutes until his explosive charges would detonate. The power grid explosions came exactly on schedule. Lights flickered throughout the facility as primary power failed in several sections. Emergency lighting kicked in, casting everything in a dim red glow. The energy barriers protecting the prison cells flickered and died as their backup power supplies were overwhelmed. Jake moved quickly through the darkened corridors toward Princess Lyra's cell. He had studied the route carefully and knew exactly where to go even in the poor lighting. The few remaining guards were busy trying to restore power and coordinate with the teams investigating the drilling machine problems. He found Princess Lyra's cell and used his cutting torch to slice through the lock mechanism. The door slid open with a soft hiss and Jake stepped inside. Princess Lyra looked up in shock as a strange alien figure entered her cell. Jake realized that she had probably never seen a human before. To her eyes, he must have looked like just another pirate species. "Stay back," she warned, pressing herself against the far wall of the cell. "I will not cooperate with you no matter what you do to me." Jake pulled off his maintenance helmet, revealing his human features. "I'm not one of them," he said quietly. "I'm here to get you out." Princess Lyra stared at him in confusion. She had never encountered a human before, but she could sense something different about this being. His mind felt unusual, more chaotic and creative than the rigid thought patterns of most galactic species. "What are you?" she asked. "Human," Jake replied simply. "My name is Jake Collins. I'm a cargo hauler who got stuck here when my ship broke down. I saw what they were doing to you, and I couldn't just walk away." The princess studied his face carefully. She could sense no deception in his thoughts, only genuine concern and determination. This strange being was actually trying to help her, despite having no apparent connection to the Zephyrian Empire. "Why would you risk yourself for someone you do not know?" she asked. Jake shrugged. "Because it's the right thing to do. Where I come from, you don't leave people in trouble if you can help them." Before Princess Lyra could respond, they heard shouts in the corridor outside. The guards had discovered the open cell door and were calling for reinforcements. Jake grabbed the princess's hand and pulled her toward the door. "We need to move now," he said urgently. "I have a way out of here, but we don't have much time." Princess Lyra hesitated for a moment, then decided to trust this strange human who had risked everything to save her. She followed Jake into the darkened corridor as the sounds of pursuit grew louder behind them. The real escape was just beginning, and Jake hoped his improvised plan would be enough to get them both out alive. The pirates would not give up their valuable prisoner easily, and the asteroid facility was designed to prevent exactly this kind of escape attempt. But Jake had one more advantage that the pirates did not know about. Humans were very good at improvising when their original plans fell apart, and something told him that his plan was about to fall apart very soon. Jake led Princess Lyra through the darkened corridors as shouts echoed behind them. The emergency lighting cast strange shadows on the walls, making every corner look threatening. Jake knew these passages from his hours of exploration, but running Through them in near darkness with an injured princess was much harder than crawling through the ventilation system alone. "This way," Jake whispered, pulling Lyra toward a maintenance tunnel he had discovered earlier. The entrance was hidden behind a panel that looked like part of the wall. Most people would walk right past it without noticing. Behind them, they could hear Commander Vex roaring orders to his crew. "Find them, search every tunnel, every room, every hiding place. I want that princess back in custody within the hour." Princess Lyra stumbled as they entered the narrow tunnel. The torture she had endured had left her weak and unsteady. Jake caught her arm and helped her keep moving forward. "I can barely walk," she gasped. "You should leave me and save yourself." "Not happening," Jake said firmly. "We stick together, or we don't make it at all." The tunnel led to an old mining shaft that connected to the asteroid's surface. Jake had placed rope and climbing equipment here during his preparation. The shaft was narrow and steep, but it would take them away from the main facility where the pirates were searching. As they started climbing, Princess Lyra's telepathic abilities began to return. The dampening devices in her cell were no longer affecting her, and she could sense the minds of their pursuers. What she felt made her afraid. "They are very angry," she told Jake as they climbed. "Commander Vex has promised a huge reward for whoever brings me back. Every pirate in the base is hunting for us." "Good," Jake replied, surprising her. "That means they're not thinking clearly. Angry people make mistakes." They emerged from the shaft into a natural cavern near the asteroid's surface. Jake had hidden supplies here, including food, water, and additional tools. He also had several more explosive devices that he had not used yet. "We need to keep moving," Jake said, checking his watch. "My next distraction should start in about 10 minutes. "What kind of distraction?" Princess Lyra asked. Jake grinned. "You'll see." Exactly 10 minutes later, a series of explosions rocked the asteroid. Jake had programmed the mining equipment to overload its power systems at specific times. The explosions were not large enough to damage the facility seriously, but they created enough chaos to keep the pirates busy. Emergency sirens wailed throughout the base as automated fire suppression systems activated. Jake and Princess Lyra used the confusion to move through passages that would normally be heavily guarded. Jake's knowledge of the asteroid's layout let them avoid most of the search teams, but they could not avoid all of them, a patrol of 3. Pirates spotted them crossing an open chamber near the surface. The aliens opened fire immediately, sending energy blasts that burned holes in the rock walls around Jake and Princess Lyra. "Down!" Jake shouted, pushing the princess behind a boulder. Energy beams sizzled overhead, leaving glowing scorch marks. Wherever they hit, Jake pulled out one of his improvised weapons, a modified cutting torch that could project a focused flame. It was not much compared to the pirates' energy rifles, but it was better than nothing. "Stay here," he told Princess Lyra. "I'm going to try something stupid." Before she could protest, Jake rolled out from behind the boulder and charged straight at the pirates. They had not expected such a direct attack from someone using primitive weapons. Jake's cutting torch caught the nearest pirate by surprise, burning through his weapon and forcing him to retreat. The other 2 pirates tried to get a clear shot, but Jake was moving too fast and too unpredictably. He zigzagged across the chamber, using the rough terrain to stay ahead of their aim. Princess Lyra watched in amazement as this strange human fought 3 armed opponents with nothing but courage and creativity. Jake reached the second pirate and tackled him to the ground. They wrestled for control of the alien's weapon while the third pirate tried to get a shot that would not hit his companion. Jake managed to turn the energy rifle toward the third pirate and fired, sending him diving for cover. "Run!" Jake shouted to Princess Lyra. "Head for the tunnel behind the big rock." Princess Lyra hesitated. She did not want to abandon Jake, but she could see more pirates approaching from the main facility. They were outnumbered and outgunned. Jake's brave attack had bought them a few precious minutes, but it would not be enough if they stayed to fight. She reached out with her telepathic abilities and touched Jake's mind. What she found there amazed her. His thoughts were chaotic but determined, filled with plans and backup plans and backups to the backup plans. He was thinking 3 steps ahead while fighting for his life. "Behind you," she called out telepathically, warning him about a fourth pirate who was trying to flank him. Jake spun around and threw his cutting torch like a spear. The improvised weapon struck the pirate in the chest, sending him stumbling backward into a wall. Jake grabbed the fallen alien's weapon and used it to drive back the remaining pirates. "Now we run!" Jake called out, sprinting toward Princess Lyra's position. They entered the tunnel just as more pirates poured into the chamber behind them. Energy blasts lit up the tunnel entrance, but Jake and Princess Lyra were already disappearing into the darkness ahead. The tunnel led to a series of natural caves that the pirates had never fully mapped. Jake had explored these areas during his reconnaissance and knew they connected to the docking chamber where the Lucky Strike was waiting. But the route was dangerous, full of unstable rock formations and dead-end passages. "The ceiling is not safe here," Princess Lyra warned as they moved through a particularly narrow section. Her telepathic senses could detect stress patterns in the rock above them. "I know," Jake replied. "That's why I brought these." He pulled out several small explosive charges and placed them carefully against support pillars in the tunnel behind them. When the pursuing pirates entered this section, Jake would bring down the ceiling and block their path. It was risky, since the collapse might trap him and Princess Lyra as well, but it was their best chance to escape. They heard voices and footsteps echoing from the tunnel entrance. The pirates had found their trail and were following rapidly. Jake finished placing his charges and activated the timer. "We have 2 minutes to get clear," he told Princess Lyra. "Can you run?" "I can try," she replied. Though she was clearly exhausted, they ran through the remaining caves as fast as Princess Lyra's injured condition would allow. Behind them, Jake's explosives detonated with a thunderous roar. Tons of rock crashed down, sealing the tunnel and cutting off their pursuers, but their problems were far from over. When they reached the docking chamber, they found that the pirates had discovered the Lucky Strike. 2 pirate ships were hovering near Jake's freighter, their weapons trained on its hull. "Attention, human vessel," came a voice over the communication system. "Surrender the princes immediately or we will destroy your ship." Jake looked at his battered freighter and then at Princess Lyra. She was depending on him to get her to safety, but his ship was the only way off this asteroid. If the pirates destroyed the Lucky Strike, they would both be trapped here. "Do you have any more surprises planned?" Princess Lyra asked quietly. Jake studied the situation carefully. The pirate ships were sleek and fast, armed with weapons that could vaporize his freighter in seconds. But they were also overconfident, positioned to prevent escape rather than to protect themselves from attack. "Actually, yes," Jake said slowly. "One more surprise? But you're not going to like it." He began explaining his final desperate plan. Princess Lyra listened with growing alarm as she realized just how dangerous and crazy this human's ideas could be. "That plan will probably get us both killed," she said when he finished. "Probably," Jake agreed. "But it's the only chance we have. Are you willing to trust me one more time?" Princess Lyra looked into Jake's eyes and saw the same determination that had driven him to rescue her in the first place. This human was either the bravest person she had ever met or the most foolish. Perhaps both. "What do you need me to do?" she asked. Jake's final plan was simple and insane. The Lucky Strike's cargo hold still contained several tons of industrial mining explosives that he had been transporting to Kepler Station. If he could get aboard his ship and activate the explosives remotely, he could turn his own freighter into a massive bomb that would destroy both pirate vessels. The problem was that he and Princess Lyra needed to escape before the explosion happened. "The docking clamps are still attached," Jake explained as they crouched behind a pile of mining equipment. "If I can reach the manual release controls, I can disconnect the ship while the explosives are counting down. We'll have maybe 30 seconds to get clear before everything blows up." 30 seconds is not very long," Princess Lyra pointed out. "It's better than nothing," Jake replied. "And those pirate ships won't expect us to destroy our own escape route. They'll be focused on preventing us from reaching the ship, not on getting away from it." Princess Lyra used her telepathic abilities to scan the minds of the pirates in the hovering ships. What she found was exactly what Jake had predicted. They were arrogant and overconfident, certain that two fugitives could not possibly threaten their advanced vessels. "They think we are trapped," she reported. "They are calling for Commander Vex to come and collect me personally. They want to claim the reward for my capture." "Perfect," Jake said. "That gives us maybe 10 minutes before the real trouble arrives." Jake had one advantage that the pirates did not know about. During his hours of exploration, he had found an old maintenance shaft that led directly to the Lucky Strike's engine compartment. The shaft was too small for most alien species, but a human could just barely fit through it. "I'm going to crawl through that shaft and reach my ship," Jake explained. "Once I'm aboard, I'll start the countdown on the explosives and release the docking clamps. You need to be ready to run for the emergency escape pods the moment you see my ship start to move." "What about you?" Princess Lyra asked with concern. "I'll figure something out," Jake said. Though they both knew his chances of survival were very slim, Princess Lyra reached out and touched Jake's hand. For a moment their minds connected through her telepathic abilities. She felt his fear, his determination, and his genuine desire to save her even at the cost of his own life. In return, she shared her gratitude and admiration for his courage. "No one has ever risked so much for me," she said quietly. "Not even my father's most loyal soldiers." "Your father's soldiers have training and backup and proper equipment," Jake replied. "I just have stubbornness." Jake began crawling through the maintenance shaft while Princess Lyra created a distraction. She used her telepathic abilities to project false images into the minds of the pirate crews, making them think they saw movement in areas where nothing was actually happening. The confused pirates began firing at shadows while Jake made his way undetected toward his ship. The shaft was even tighter than Jake had expected. He had to remove most of his equipment and squeeze through sections that were barely wide enough for his shoulders. But after 20 minutes of painful crawling, he reached the Lucky Strike's engine compartment. Jake quickly made his way to the cargo hold and began setting up the explosive charges. He programmed them for a 5-minute countdown, which would give him just enough time to release the docking clamps and try to reach an escape pod. The explosives were powerful enough to crack asteroids, more than sufficient to destroy 2 pirate ships. As Jake worked, he could hear the pirates outside discussing their plans over the communication system. Commander Vex had arrived and was preparing to board the Lucky Strike personally to retrieve Princess Lyra. They still believed that their prisoners were hiding somewhere in the docking chamber. "Begin the countdown," Jake whispered to himself as he activated the explosives. The timer began ticking down from 5 minutes. Jake ran to the ship's control room and began the sequence to release the docking clamps. The Lucky Strike had been designed for quick departures from dangerous situations, and Jake had practiced this procedure hundreds of times. During his years as a cargo hauler, the docking clamps released with a loud clang that echoed through the chamber. Both pirate ships immediately turned their weapons toward the Lucky Strike, but Jake had already disabled the ship's engines. The freighter began drifting away from the docking platform under its own momentum, moving slowly but steadily toward the chamber's exit. "The human ship is moving," one of the pirate captains reported over the radio. "Should we destroy it?" "No, you fools," Commander Vex roared back. "The princess might be aboard. Disable the engines and prepare to board." The pirate ships moved closer to the Lucky Strike, using tractor beams to slow its drift and position themselves for boarding. They had no idea that they were flying directly into a trap. Jake had 3 minutes left on the countdown. He needed to reach an escape pod, but the Lucky Strike's pods were located on the opposite side of the ship from where he was now. He would have to run through corridors that were being scanned by pirate sensors. Meanwhile, Princess Lyra had made her way to the emergency escape pods that Jake had told her about. These small vehicles were designed for asteroid mining emergencies and could survive in space for several hours. She climbed into one of the pods and prepared to launch, but she hesitated when she realized that Jake was still aboard his ship. 2 minutes left on the countdown. Jake was halfway to the escape pods when he heard the sound of cutting torches. The pirates were burning through the Lucky Strike's hull to create their own boarding access. They would be inside the ship within minutes, and they would definitely find the explosives. 1 minute left. Jake made a desperate decision. Instead of trying to reach an escape pod, he changed direction and headed for the Lucky Strike's small emergency shuttle. This vehicle was faster than the escape pods and might be able to get clear of the explosion in time. But it was located in the ship's main bay, right where the pirates were trying to enter. 30 seconds left. Jake reached the shuttle bay just as the first pirates broke through the hull. He could see Commander Vex leading a boarding party of heavily armed soldiers. The pirate leader spotted Jake immediately and raised his weapon. "Surrender now, human, and we might let you live," Vex shouted. "Sorry," Jake called back as he dove into the shuttle. "I've got somewhere else to be." 15 seconds left. Jake fired up the shuttle's engines and blasted out of the Lucky Strike's bay without waiting for the launch sequence to complete properly. The small craft shot through the docking chamber like a bullet, heading for the tunnel that led to open space. 10 seconds left. Princess Lyra launched her escape pod at the same moment, following Jake's shuttle toward the exit. "Behind them, Commander." Vex realized what was happening and began screaming orders to his ships. 5 seconds left. The two pirate vessels tried to pursue the escaping craft, but they were too close to the Lucky Strike to maneuver effectively. Their ships were fast and powerful, but they needed time and space to build up speed. 0. The explosion lit up the entire asteroid. Jake's cargo of mining explosives detonated with the force of a small nuclear weapon, vaporizing the Lucky Strike and everything within a kilometer radius. The two pirate ships simply vanished in the blast. Along with Commander Vex and his boarding party, the shockwave caught Jake's shuttle and Princess Lyra's escape pod, sending them tumbling through space. But they were just far enough away to survive the explosion. Though both craft were badly damaged, Jake's shuttle lost power and began drifting in the void. Princess Lyra's escape pod was still functional but had limited life support. They were alive, but they were stranded in empty space with no way to call for help, or so they thought. Princess Lyra's telepathic abilities had been fully restored when the pirate dampening devices were destroyed. She reached out across the vast emptiness of space and felt a familiar presence. Her father's fleet was searching the void sector, and they were much closer than anyone had realized. Emperor Cauldrus himself was aboard the lead ship, desperately hoping for some sign of his daughter. When Princess Lyra's telepathic call reached him, he nearly collapsed with relief and joy. "Father," her voice whispered in his mind across the light years, "I am alive. Come quickly." The Imperial fleet arrived within hours, their massive ships emerging from hyperspace like silver angels. Emperor Cauldrus personally led the rescue mission, taking a small shuttle to collect his daughter and the human who had saved her. When the Emperor first saw Jake Collins, he could hardly believe that this ordinary-looking being had accomplished what his entire military could not. Jake was unconscious from his injuries, but Princess Lyra insisted that he receive the best medical care available. As Jake recovered in the Imperial Medical Bay, Princess Lyra told her father everything that had happened. She described Jake's courage, his creativity, and his willingness to sacrifice everything for someone he had never met before. The Emperor listened with growing amazement and respect. When Jake finally woke up, he found himself in a room that was larger and more beautiful than any place he had ever seen. Princess Lyra was sitting beside his bed, and a tall figure in elegant robes was standing nearby. "Jake Collins," Emperor Cauldrus said formally, "you have done something that I will never be able to repay. You saved my daughter's life when all hope seemed lost."